today and try to solve the issue. After yesterday, I thought that I knew. Um, I think I didn't know the because I watched the videos about context, a bunch of them. So I knew how it worked, but I think I was confused about the difference between rendering and mounting and unmounting components. And I was thinking about that. Maybe it should be obvious to me in the beginning that the context doesn't mount and unmount components. But I think it was confusing because of the way the situation that it is here and the reason why I'm having the problem. Because here is using the custom React reconciler. So I think that made me, because I didn't know before how any of this worked. So I think that made me more confused about what could be the problem. But I think after yesterday about thinking about it more, like maybe it should be more intuitive what is going on. But yeah, I'm not sure. So I was very confused yesterday. I spent a bunch of time thinking with the other project as well. So I think today I'm just gonna uh, try to step over these functions. I also stepped over this for a lot of time, these function calls here, to try to understand how they work more. But it's very confusing. Oh, the other thing that I realized is that on the functional component I couldn't think about a way to translate this. Like the way that Dan something I think is part of React core team. The way he advises you to translate a class component into a functional component is to choose multiple use effects. And then one use effect would be for whatever happens in the component did update, and the other one would be for the component did mount. But I couldn't figure out a way to translate the component did update because I need to have access to the mount node there on the other use effect. And then I tried a bunch of different variations and it wasn't working. So this is the downside that I realized. If I pass everything to the functional component, then this is gonna recreate the app and create the container each time that there is a change on the children. But the way that it is here with the class, it only creates the container and does this update here one time, which is when the component is mounting. And then whenever there is a change on the children, it's just gonna run this function here. It actually doesn't run this one, which is another thing that I was confused about. And then in the functional component, because you have to put the children as a dependency here, it's gonna mount and unmount each time there is a change in the children. So it's slightly different. Because the only difference would be that, and this is what I was thinking about doing, but I couldn't figure out a way yet. You should just do another use effect, and then on this other use effect, I put the children as a dependency, and then I call the pixie update container here. And that would make it so that is more similar to the way that this one works, where it only runs this stuff once when the component is mounting, and then for the other updates, it's gonna just call this function here. But yeah. So now what I'm thinking about doing, and what I think it is the solution, but I'm confused because I don't know, like I think ChatGPT confuses me as well because I put some stuff, I did some prompts with ChatGPT and then it says one thing, but then when I console log the application, it's actually another thing. So I think that it might be a mistake that with ChatGPT, but it makes me more confused about. And I think that the challenge is that each situation is going to be different because depending on whether or not you put dependencies or you put other hooks inside of the component, it might change the order of the mounting and the mounting. I think that's what makes this very hard because there are several different things that can happen, I think, depending on whatever I put inside of the as the children of this component here. But what I'm thinking about doing now, the way to solve this, is to figure out a way to manually unmount or run the unmounting functions of the components that are children of the stage here. And then in that way, it's gonna call the unmounting functions for all the components before the app gets destroyed. But it might be impossible because it may also run after anyways. Because like I don't have control over that because it's React that decides the order. So maybe if I unmount here, it's still gonna try to unmount after the app gets destroyed. So the thing that the guy that I think he works on the Pixie thing and his reply on the Discord is to try to do it the other way, which is just to use it to try to set up the events using the Pixie.js events library. But I don't understand how that works, and also I didn't understand very well like what he means, because like the whole point of using the Pixie viewport library so I don't have to do the functions again. And I imagine that it's gonna be hard because the thing is that I don't know, like if it is, I don't know which way to is the best to go with. It might be better to just try to do it directly through Pixie, and then I don't create this constant component here, and just set up. I think that this strategy is like cleaner in my mind, but it seems like it will be harder in the beginning. That's a problem, because I don't understand how to create the events. If I manage to work with Pixie viewport, then I can just study the functions from the viewport library, and then I can understand, but I can also study them now and then just translate them into using the events directly on Pixie. Just pretty much copy the functionality. So I don't know what I'm gonna do. I think I'm gonna try to solve this first, and then I'm probably gonna study the event system of Pixie anyway, because I'll probably need to study this. Like the other challenge that I'm gonna have right after I fix this is the challenge of like thinking about how I'm gonna manage the two different events, because I need to use a physics engine. I think this is also something that he said, that he asked, said that maybe I don't even need physics engine because Pixie handles all the events already, the interaction events. But I disagree with that. I think I do need a Pixie physics library because I'm going to do a lot of different stuff. So like this is another challenge that I don't know, because the Matter.js physics engine has some events, and I think it makes a lot more sense to use their events to handle the interaction between elements. Otherwise, what's the point of using the physics library anyway? So I have to think about how I'm gonna add the events to the viewport, to the view, without messing up the events on the Matter.js. So for that reason, I think it might be better to try to make it work directly with the event system, because that way you have more flexibility than if I use the Pixie viewport library. Now, let me start this stuff. My concern is that might be impossible to unmount the components here. I was thinking about console logging. I think I'm gonna do that now. Just console log the children. I'm not sure if it's this props children. It is this dot props the children. Yeah. It's pretty much this thing here. So I was thinking about, it's probably going to be an array with objects, and then I can map over the array, and then I can call the facts. So I have to figure out first how does the React sets up the events. And it's very annoying to go over the source code of React, because there's a bunch of different loops that obviously is going to traverse the whole tree, and because the project is very complex, I spend a bunch of time tapping over a bunch of functions because it has to go over all the nodes, and I don't wanna miss anything, let's say. So I have to go one by one. But then it takes a huge ass time. That's the problem. A long ass time, not huge ass time. So yeah, hopefully, I think all the breakpoints are still here. Because yesterday I just thought about I'm gonna put a breakpoint on every single function that looks important, and then that way I can just run it instead of stepping over one by one. But it's still gonna be annoying, I think. I have to run this. So the idea is to map over the children, and then I have to figure out how does React mounts, how does React runs the effect. For the class component, it's easy. You just have to check if the instance is a class, and if it is, then you just call the component will mount. You check if the component will mount is a function. If it is, you call it, and then it's gonna run the logic. But obviously, all the components that I'm gonna use are functional components. So it's harder because the unmounting part of the cycle is on the use effect. And this is the stuff that I think I was confused about in the beginning, and something that was a blind spot that I didn't realize. But it's kind of weird because I think what happened is that I had the intuitive understanding of how it works, but I didn't know why it worked the way that it worked, let's say. So it wasn't a problem because in the normal applications, I would never change the state inside of the context provider. It didn't make sense to me to do this, to put a use effect inside of a context provider. I didn't see the point of that, I think. And because of that, then I didn't have a problem because obviously it doesn't fuck up the cycle of mounting and unmounting. And I also remember seeing videos that talked about this thing that the downside of using context is that it's gonna render all the components that rely on that context each time. But I think I wasn't clear on the difference between the rendering and mounting and unmounting. And now it's a lot more clear to me. Because it's kind of a weird thing that I think it's because of the way that people teach this stuff, the way that the videos talk about. If you don't understand really well, because usually people talk about concepts, and the way that React works is different because it's just at the fundamental level is just running functions and doing if-else statements and using global variables and things like that. So when you put the concept like mounting and unmounting and rendering, it becomes kind of difficult to understand what is actually going on. I think now I understand much better. That what goes on is just that it runs the function first for all the components. So if the functional component is just going to run the function, and then it runs the use effect, but because the use effect is a function, and then there's also parameter, which is the dependencies, what it's going to do is that it's going to set up that function as a callback at some point in the cycle, and then based on the differences, the diffing algorithm, which is the differences in props, is going to determine whether or not it's going to run the use effect function. And that's all that's happening. So the use effect runs at a different time because it sets up a callback in the update. But the rendering runs synchronously, I think, in the beginning. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Just a bunch of loops because it has to go over the whole tree. It's very annoying to step over each time. Okay, so children is gonna be an object. I guess the props is gonna have. I guess it depends on the point, maybe. No, it looks like it's just the component right after. So I'll have to implement like a recursion. This is the thing that is kind of difficult. I think yesterday as well I was doing some prompting with ChatGPT, and then like he gave me some options as well, which would be to create a mapping and then keep track of the components that I mount in this stage, and then manually remove and move the components based on that. So like it's kind of difficult because I also have to think about what is the best way to do it, because it might be very inefficient to just traverse all the components when you're, because essentially what I want to do is kind of like similar to React, where I want to just get the components that rely on the app in the context and then unmount those components. So I think it's inefficient if I traverse the whole tree and I change all the components or run the mounting for all the components. And this is the problem, it's going to be an object with arrays, because it's a tree structure, obviously. So I have to create something that, if I decide to do it this way, I think the easiest way would be just to call like a function on the reconciler. So I think it's probably better to check the reconciler first. But the thing about this is that I was thinking about, if I call a function here, like it's gonna expect the nodes at a certain state, let's say. It's gonna pass some data structure here that it's probably gonna be different than if I call it directly on the component, the stage component. So I won't be able to unmount. But maybe I could call a function here that triggers the process in the React internal structure, the fiber, so that call a function directly from the reconciler that triggers the process of the React fiber work loop that will make the fiber update the component. If I was able to do that, then I think that is probably the best approach and the easiest one, because then React would handle the logic for calling the functions to unmount the component. But I'm not sure if that's possible or not. I know there are functions here to remove the child and append the child, but I think it's like a different situation. That's the problem. And I think the reason why this happens is because I am using they are using the custom reconciler. Because I think that in normal circumstances it wouldn't happen like this, because like here the whole tree, the whole second tree, which is created by the custom reconciler, is rendered inside of the lifecycle of the component on the React DOM. So because of that, it makes it so that the order of mounting and unmounting is not synchronized, because the React DOM reconciler is rendering the other custom renderer like inside of its own lifecycle. So if they were both rendered by the same render, then I think the logic would be correct, because it would unmount the children first, I think. Maybe I should open the other one to show this, but this is the part that I'm not 100% sure. I just think it is like this now because of the console logs on this example here. That also has the... like it's kind of the same thing, but I'm not 100% sure if it's exactly the same thing. To test, I would have to create the custom reconciler on this example here. But the problem is that the custom reconciler only works if you're using Pixie elements, because the way that the functions work here for appending the children is gonna call the add child function, which is not a function for DOM elements, it's a function for adding Pixie components. So in order to make this reconciler work, I have to put Pixie.js elements instead of using normal DOM elements. Or I can change the functions on this custom reconciler, but this is a lot of work. Not sure if it's worth like going. Here I have console logs for the render and the mounting and unmounting of these two components here. And in this one, it renders the parent, then the child, then mounts the child first, and then mounts the parent. So it creates the value when it's rendering the parent, then renders the child, then mounts the child, then mounts the parent, then unmounts the child, and unmounts the parent. With Pixie, I think it's the other way around. First, it's gonna render the parent, then it's gonna mount the child, but then it's gonna unmount the parent first, instead of unmounting the child. And I think that happens because it is using the custom reconciler. So this function call here is supposed to unmount the components, but it doesn't. So I think that this function here, it just updates the state of this mount node and replaces the children with null, which is also kind of weird to think about, because then, like, I'm not 100% sure exactly how it works. Because if you're putting new children, like regardless of whether or not it unmounts the components, in the next iteration you're putting new children on the custom reconciler, because it's running the component did mount part of the cycle, and then it's like putting new objects, which would be the new functions, on the next loop here. But I think that the problem is just because it unmounts this one first before it unmounts the children. And the reason why it does that is because they're rendered with different renderers. So React doesn't understand that, like, there is no link between the two. That's the problem. So React doesn't understand the context of both of them in the bridge. And if it was a normal situation, it would... Yeah, but this is the thing, is because even in normal React, from the videos I saw yesterday and from ChatGPT prompts, I think that React doesn't unmount the components when there's a change on the value of the context. It just re-renders the components, but it doesn't unmount them. And that's the thing that is kind of... I think it does make sense because it's more like optimized, let's say, but at the same time, like, it shouldn't work that way. There should be an exception when you change the value on the context provider itself, because then you get into a situation like this where it might be the case that you're destroying the value or something like that. And then because the dependencies of the context don't unmount, then it fucks up the application. I'm not sure if that makes sense or not. I guess the best thing to do is to try to call a bunch of functions. I want to see if I can spot the functions. Maybe I should put I think I have the breakpoints on the host config, because I want to see what exactly these functions are expecting to have. I want to understand the context of what happens before and after it calls these functions on the custom reconciler. So I understand, like, what is the data structure that is passing through these functions, and how is determining how to run the side effects. I think I'll be right back. Obviously, the other thing that I can do is just like for my thing specifically, I can just specify or just call the like I can pass the viewport as a. Oh, but actually, yeah, the viewport is gonna be part of the children, but I can access the viewport at some point through this object here, just see where the viewport is, and then call the function on the viewport, destroy. Like that would be the easiest thing to do, I think, and it would solve the problem probably. Maybe I should do that first to see if it would solve it or not. And maybe that's a good idea, just to validate. But I think I would like to find a solution that solves for regardless of how many components you have. Just a more general solution. But at the same time, I'm not really sure because I spent a lot of time on this problem already, so and I still have a lot of things to do. There's a lot of different challenges to solve on top of this. And part of me thinks that I should just get to the point as fast as possible that I'm setting the interpreter and compiler, because that's gonna help me. Like, I'm gonna be able to create a feedback loop system where I can use the stuff that I build to learn faster. So, and this is gonna allow me to optimize what I'm building as well. So it's gonna be like a lot more efficient. Because then I can use the stuff to study these things here and also help me debug or think about these problems. So it might be better to do that. The other thing is like I don't really like the way that the Pixie library is built, because it's very hard to understand what is going on. But when I create the app, what parts of Pixie is it gonna use? Because like there's a bunch of inheritances going on, and then inside of those inheritances you have like a bunch of imports of different parts of the Pixie that use a bunch of different packages, and that makes it really difficult to understand what's going on and how to use the stuff on the library. And the documentation doesn't really help that much because it's just the explanation of the methods. So I think it's going to be very challenging to study the events. But building the interpreter and the other stuff is going to be hard as well. So I don't really know what's the best way to go about it. This is the stuff that I'm talking about, I think. But here, maybe I removed the debugger from the breakpoints from here. Oh, it should be here. It's weird because I think when I have the debugger breakpoints, it executes in a slightly different way because of the way that the console logs there. It should be going over those parts as well at some point. On a high level, it's very easy to understand how it works, I think. React. It's just confusing to learn it when you're stepping over the functions because it's like just a mess with a bunch of different calls to functions everywhere. But it's pretty simple, I think, to understand. It just goes over the tree, then flags everything that needs to be updated, and then in the work loop it updates this stuff, and then once it's ready to commit, it's just gonna change, swap the nodes of the trees. So it just changes the pointer to the one that has the work finished, and then it resets the previous one if there is an update, and if there isn't, it just skips the functions. It calls the bailouts or bailouts, however you say that, and then skips the execution. Yeah, this one. So I think this means that it doesn't have an update, so it goes to this point and completes the unit of work. I think it's on this part here, the reconciliation, that is gonna create the work in progress thing, maybe. And then it's gonna update. Yes. So if first is the work loop where it's gonna traverse everything, then it calls the perform unit of work, I think, yeah, and then it calls begin work, and I think on this functions it sets up everything to start the updating process. I think I need to read articles again about the reconciliation to remember what's the point. I think it is obviously just to update the nodes, but I think I mess up the order of things in my mind sometimes. I think it's difficult to visualize because there is the two processes are separated. There's the rendering process and the commit process, the commit stage, rendering stage and commit stage. And then the render can be paused, the commit can't, and the render is just the updating process of the performing this stuff on the fiber. So changing the values of the nodes. Each node is a fiber, and then the fiber class has all the states and all of the things that is necessary for the nodes. And then on these loops here, it's gonna update each one. And then the commit phase is the separate phase, and that's the phase that actually does the changes to the DOM. So because they are separated, I think it's harder to understand what's going on. Especially when you have a lot of trees, a lot of nodes on the tree, because like it's very annoying to keep track of each one, to see here like at what point it is and what's gonna happen. And the switch statements are the stuff that it determines what kind of a node it is, and then it's going to determine what kind of functions are called for the reconciliation thing. And then you have the global variables, which are the lanes and the queues that are going to determine at what point the updates happen. I spent a bunch of time yesterday just going over one by one. It's very annoying. I think I wrote down as well the order of the thing. There was an article that talked about this, and I think it was one of the best articles that I saw. Maybe I saved on the favorites here. Where there's an animation that shows the order that the nodes are updated in the sequence. I think this is the order here. So first perform unit of work, then begin work, then complete unit of work, complete work, and then after it goes over all of these functions for each node, then it's gonna go to the commit phase, I think, which has the finished work fiber, and then it's gonna swap the pointers. Let's see if I can find on the bookmarks. Maybe I didn't save the... the article. I think it didn't save it. Just save another one that explains the functions on the reconciler. Whatever. I think ChatGPT is not gonna give me an answer to this. Maybe, but then I was gonna say if I get the children instead of the app provider, but I'm just gonna get all the children for the class. It's not very good. So if I create a map and then I put the children on the map, or I can store just the functions for mounting to check to see if they have or not, but This one is interesting. But I think he's not gonna amount. It's interesting that the pixie component, custom component doesn't show here. Not sure why. It should be inside of the world component. It's passing app.stage here. So I think that it goes until it gets to the bottom and then it goes back to the top, which is gonna be the host component of the custom reconciler, which is gonna be the app.stage, and then it calls this function. This is the other thing I'm not really sure why they do. Because I don't think that's... Maybe inside of the Pixie application it receives this event somewhere, but I couldn't find anywhere, I think. So I guess they're just doing for the option if you want to receive. Maybe it does receive, and then when it receives this event it probably updates, it renders again, I think. I think that's what it does. That's why it's sending, because it's updating the parent component, which is the stage or the container. So as it adds elements to the canvas, it's gonna send this event, which is gonna trigger a re-render, I think, an update of the thing, but I'm not really sure. Yeah, this it sets up the event listener here, and it's gonna call needs a render update, which is gonna put the flag to true. I think I understand now. So it sets up this event here, so every time there is a change on the canvas, it's gonna call this function, which sets up this value to true, and then based on this condition, it's gonna decide whether or not it updates here, which calls this render here function, the renderer, which handles the view of the canvas. And maybe I'm thinking about how I'm gonna solve the stuff. So trying to think about what method I'm gonna try to call there to mount the components, but I think I need to get to the point that it removes the child, but it's probably gonna be the same thing. That's the issue. Because the data structure that I have access to in the stage is different than whatever is gonna call here. Because here is just calling the functions on the class themselves. But maybe I can see. I think that's it. Yeah, but the thing is that I have access to the component here, not the class. So it's different. But I was gonna say maybe I can. Yeah, but if I call the function, it's not the same as calling the amount thing. And it's gonna add the other stuff to the graphics now. Just the elements of the canvas there. It's gonna be the same thing. And then send the event. Same shit here. It's gonna do this for, because there are 4 different graphics to set up the boundaries of the animation. The rectangles, so it's gonna do this for all 4 of them, I think. I think when it calls reconciling, it's gonna do the complete work. So it does the perform works first, then when it gets time to reconcile, it goes back and completes through the functions. And this just creates a React element, I think. Oh, this is a function from Pixie, I think. Oh, fuck, I'm gonna have to. But this function is from Pixie. So yeah, it's because you set up on the host config. The create instance is gonna map to the create element, which is a function from Pixie that they created to create the elements, which holds the types of component inside of the types there. So that's why it's doing this check here. So these elements is gonna be a dictionary with all the components that Pixie has. And then it's gonna create the element based on this, and then it has the life cycles here. Which probably puts breakpoints there as well. This creates instance maps to the create element.
I don't think there can be any more fascinating preoccupation than that. Because it's so mysterious. It's so
It has the components, type of components here.
what you are in your inmost being escapes
Then it
your
calls the function, and
examination
the function is going to be
in
an
rather the
instance.
same way that you
Ah, so
can't
maybe,
look directly into your own
yeah, maybe I
eyes
can do
without
that
using a
actually.
mirror.
Now
You
that I
can't bite your own
think about it,
teeth.
that would be like
You can't
probably an
taste your own
easiest
tongue.
solution for. But it's still,
You
I'm
can't
gonna have
touch
to
the tip of this finger
go over all the
with
elements
this finger.
anyway, because I have access to the children, which is a
And that's
tree
why there's
structure.
always an element of profound
But I could
mystery
go over, like traverse the whole tree and then call the
in the problem of who we
function
are.
for each one. The question is, would that be inefficient? So I would have to call the function and then I'll have access to this instance here. And I think it's about the props as well, because I wouldn't have the props, I think. But if I could call the function and get access to the instance, then I could check to see if the type of the wheel unmount is a function. And that would allow me to manually unmount the custom components first. So all custom components that use the app would unmount before the app gets destroyed.